Welcome back to Mission Possible. I'm Agent Dr. Lindsay Lewis at Pearl River Community College, and I'm ready to lead you in your next important mission. Mission, make an impression. You know what they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And this is especially true when applying for jobs, scholarships, or internships. Remember that each of these missions is part of our overall goal to help you prepare for and begin taking the next steps toward your future. So, whether you're planning to go to a 4-year college, attend a CTE program, or one of our many workforce programs at PRCC, you will need to know how to make a good first impression. And you do that through professional communication. Our objective today with Mission Make an Impression is to help you learn how to communicate professionally and build the right types of relationships to ensure future success. But before we jump in, let me tell you about my Mission Possible credentials. I teach public speaking for Pearl River Community College and also work as a training facilitator in leadership and communication. I'm passionate about helping others meet their goals by learning how to best express their ideas and show off their skills. And today, I'm going to help you do just that. Each of you should have a Mission Possible student workbook. Go ahead and find the section for this mission so that you can take notes as we go along. And remember, you'll have a field report to submit at the end of this mission. So do your best to stay focused, put away the distractions, and get the most out of this. I'm ready to get started on our assignment. Mission, make an impression. The first question that comes to mind when thinking about communicating professionally is, how do I communicate? Should I email, text, phone, or send a carrier pigeon? Okay, well, maybe not that one, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to identify what channel of communication should be used and when. So let's start by asking ourselves a few questions. First, are there instructions for the communication? Most job postings, scholarship applications, and internships will include how you should submit questions and other correspondence, as well as with whom you should communicate. So make sure that you follow the directions. This is your first opportunity to show that you are invested in doing a good job. So read all of the information thoroughly prior to asking questions or submitting documentation. But what if there aren't specific instructions on how to communicate? Well, then you're going to have a few options. A phone call or an email or a text message, assuming that face-to-face meetings are not available. And once again, no carrier pigeons. Text messaging is almost always inappropriate. And in fact, in a survey, 94% of HR professionals said that they preferred email communication, while only 5% liked text messaging. So let's just move on and take a look at email and phone calls because these will be used the most frequently. Email really is great for following up on an interview or a submission, and also for thanking the interviewer for their time. It's also helpful when you have specific questions. It's important that the first part of a successful email be a really good subject line. We're going to take a look at an example in your workbook of a good email subject line. You'll notice that it includes your name, a clear subject, and a salutation, which just means a greeting. Take a few minutes to look over this example. When it comes to the greeting, sometimes that can be a little tricky. Just the way you address people by name can really set the tone for how they receive your email. And sometimes it's hard to know if you should call someone Mr. or Miss or go more formally by their first name like Sarah. So here's a good rule of thumb that I'd like you to follow. If you're between the ages of 11 and 17 and you're addressing someone who is 18 years or older, you should always use Mr. or Miss followed by their last name. Even if you have a friendly relationship with this person, it's still always Mr. or Miss when it comes to professional communication. And you should not stray away from this unless the person specifically tells you otherwise. So don't make the assumption that you can use someone's first name. It's always safer to err on the side of being more formal rather than too casual. So finally, looking back at our email example, We've talked about the subject line and the greeting, but there's a few more elements at play, and they all make an impression to the recipient of your email. So let's take a look now at another example and see if you can find some mistakes. Take a look at this second sample that's also found in your workbook and see if you can find some errors. Take a few minutes and write down or circle any that you see. What did you notice about the second example? Did you identify that it lacked a professional email address? Sometimes this can be overlooked, but it is helpful to create an email address that is professional, including your name and no nicknames to use as your email for school or work related communication. The second mistake is in the subject line. Hey, doesn't really give the reader any information, and it's too informal for a professional email. If the reader doesn't know who you are or why the email was sent, they are much less likely to respond. Finally, if you know the person you're emailing, use their name. To whom it may concern can be used if you do not know the name of the person who will read the email, but no salutation at all is not acceptable. And finally, what about the content in the email? Notice that the correct version is clear and it provides specific information while the other is not. The second also used an abbreviation, which should always be avoided. And finally, what's up with all the question marks? Did you know that multiple question marks indicate impatience? And you certainly do not want to appear impatient with a future employer. Great work. Now you can see how even the simplest of communication, like a quick email, can either help or hurt your prospects. But now let's move on to something a little more personal. I mean, who ever really talks on the phone anymore anyway? With email, texting, chat, and DMs, sometimes it seems like there's no need. However, a phone call can really have an impact and be a great way to make a positive impression. So let's take a look at how to master the professional phone call. So let's take a look at my tips for a great professional phone call. All right, tip number one, prepare. Think about who you're calling, what your purpose is, and what you want to say. I know this seems silly, but we all know what it feels like to get a little tongue tied on a phone call. It might even be helpful for you to jot down your thoughts before dialing. And then, once someone picks up, move on to tip number two. State your name clearly. You need to know the person that you're trying to reach and your purpose. Slow down and speak clearly. You might not get the person you're calling for the first try, so be prepared to provide your name and their name and a short message. Tip number three, regulate your speed and volume of speech. Be sure to speak loud enough to be heard and avoid speaking too quickly. Tip number four, deliver your message concisely. Remember, you prepared for this. Deliver your message and listen closely to the response. You might even want to have a piece of paper and pen handy to jot down notes. It's always helpful to keep track of who you spoke with and what you spoke about with the date and the time. And then my final phone tip is to conclude politely. Always end by thanking the person on the line for their time and for answering your questions. Remember to be courteous and sincere. Once you've mastered these tips, you will be a pro at professional phone conversations. Finally, let's talk about one of the most challenging and most important forms of communication, face to face. If you find yourself a little shy or uncomfortable with face to face communication, then you can practice with your friends and family to gain confidence. Remember that you don't have to be a perfect public speaker, but we just want to help you become a more confident and professional speaker. You will want to avoid filler words such as so, you know, and also avoid saying yeah and nah and instead say yes and no. Remember, nonverbal communication can be even more important than what you say. So use your eye contact to show attention and interest, and be aware of your posture and other nonverbal communication, such as facial expressions. But my best tip is that a smile goes a long way. The more opportunities that you have to practice communicating professionally, the better you'll get. It might not be true that practice makes you perfect, but practice certainly does make you a lot more confident. Today, we discussed how to communicate through email, phone calls, and face to face. And I hope that you will make it your mission to explore these tips and take the next steps toward your goals. I'm really proud of all the students who have stuck it out through this Mission Possible, and I promise that it will pay off. I want to point out that your workbooks have some next steps and resources to help you keep the ball rolling on this mission to your future. So don't stop here. You can actually access a resume writing workshop called Mission Stand Out, where I lead you through the steps to build a really great resume. So keep pushing yourself, and best of luck in Mission Make an Impression. One last important thing. At the bottom of your workbook, you'll notice a QR code and a link to the field report. In order to get credit for this assignment, you'll need to complete that short survey, so make sure that you do it. Thank you again for your time, and we wish you all the best on your journey. This is Agent Lewis, signing off.